guys, welcome to the show. Today I have a very special guest, Katy Faust, and we're going to be talking about why Christians compromise or cave so easily on the LGBTQ issues. Uh, it's a very common phenomenon, and we're going to get into why. We're going to actually start by talking about Chip and Joanna Gaines. I know I did an episode on them last week, but we barely scratched the surface. So we're going to start with them, and then we're going to get into why Christians fall into this compromise. So Katy Faust, if you don't know her, she's the founder and president of Them Before Us, a global movement defending children's rights to their mother and father. Her articles have appeared in Newsweek, USA Today, The Federalist, Public Discourse, World Magazine, and so on. She's written several books, including Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. I like that title. And her most recent book is Pro-Child Politics, and it was published in September of 2024. Welcome, Katy Faust.
I'm a big fan. I want to say fan girl. And I have been like waiting and wanting and praying, Lord, please just let Becket knock on my door. And it finally happened. I like opened that Twitter message and it was like,
oh my
here
gosh,
it is.
I love it.
It's my
That's
delight. I'm
hilarious.
really, really happy to be listening to you at 1.0 speed because
thank you. And I see all of your ex tweets and I just am like, I agree. And I'm very encouraged by your stance on a lot of issues, especially surrounding sex, gender, and marriage. But you wrote this article in the Federalist, and the title is, and this is the reason this really sparked my interest is because I see so many Christians caving to the culture. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's kind of like basically what my show is all about, is trying to help Christians not cave to the culture. And the title of your article is Chip and Joanna Gaines's Compromise is a Warning to Us All. Now, for those who have been under a rock, I did a show last week on Chip and Joanna Gaines, I think last week or the week before. But for those who don't remember, kind of tell us what happened with them and how they caved on this issue.
So I'm not a huge Chip and Joanna Gaines followers. I had a friend take me to Waco because I think we were driving from Austin to Houston, or I don't know. It was in between something like we have to go to Waco. So I went and I did buy a really cute like patterned puff sleeve dress, which I think, is sort of their brand. But I really don't know a lot about them, but I know of them. And I knew that they were supposed to be the Christian couple that hadn't compromised, but that was doing a good job of being in the world, like bringing excellence and bringing beauty to sort of their sphere, which is like decoration and home renovation. But I don't know, like I had a pretty good impression of them. So anyway, they like Chip posted this thing last week on X, 2 weeks ago, I guess, and was like, y'all are going to love this new show. It's like, it's going to be a full family experience. It's a social experiment, but I think you're going to love it. And so then, we all looked at the preview, and there's 3 different families that are all taken back to the 1880s where they ditch their makeup and their electronics and they have to go back to a place where there's no running water. And it's like, it's kind of an interesting premise for a show. But then one of the 3 families was a gay couple that has 2, I always say 2 surrogate customized motherless children. That's what they have, right? This is not some kind of accidental mother loss. This is not even adoption. This is the curating of children through a commercial process that are made to be intentionally motherless. So I was like, oh, whoa there. I kind of assumed like, well, this is Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? So there must have been some kind of oversight. Maybe the casting director kind of slipped it in without their knowledge. But then once Chip tweeted like his promo, and there was nothing but critique. There was nothing but backlash. There was not one comment on his X thread that was like, this looks like a really good show. Can't wait to watch this with my family. Then it started to all come out. These videos were surfaced of one of the gay couples, one of the guys that was like, I found the flyer where they advertised for this new show, and the flyer featured a same-sex couple. So it was very clear that the Gaineses and their production team were looking for a same-sex headed household. And then the two guys get on, what was it, Queer Tea or something. And they're like, we did this because we saw it as an opportunity to normalize
Mhm.
same-sex families. So both the production team said, we
As
want,
if it hasn't been normalized already, but go ahead.
as if LGBT characters and queer families are not already overrepresented in media, which they absolutely are. You know, I think that you've got um, the GLAD statistics of like where we are in media, and like it's always
By the way, I
overrepresented.
used to go to the GLAAD Awards, just so you know, just before I was a Christian. But go ahead.
I'm not a fan. Let's just say
I'm not
not a
either.
fan. Not a glad fan. Not glad.
Not either.
Not glad. So anyway, it just was really obvious that this wasn't some mistake. It wasn't an accident. There really was some purposeful promotion of this family that always requires children lose a relationship with one adult to whom they have a natural right. So I was satisfied and thankful that their fan base, for the most part, was not having it at all. But really surprised and sad that it looks like they're following sort of this familiar slide of compromise that so many other celebrities, Christian celebrities, have walked down in the past.
And Chip Gaines tweeted after kind of the backlash. He tweeted this: "Talk, ask questions, listen, maybe even learn. Too much to ask of modern American Christian culture. Judge first, understand later / never." Now, the problem with this tweet is there's this idea of talk, ask questions, listen. It's so squishy, and it's like, no, we don't need to ask questions and listen. We know what the Bible says about marriage and gender and sexuality. Like we don't need to spend more time talking about it. It's
Yep.
just like this constant effort to sort of uh just like continue this like fake conversation that doesn't need to exist.
Well, and it's fascinating when someone says, "Stop judging me. You're judging too much," right? Like he's making a judgment about us
Yeah.
for judging. So it's like, yeah, you can't have it both ways. Also, I love that, obviously the most cited Bible verse by unbelievers is the kind of mantra that he adopted, which is judge not lest you be judged. But later on in that same chapter, Jesus says, stop judging by mere appearances and judge rightly. We're actually called to judge. And we're
Yeah.
called to judge not by looking at superficial criteria, but we're supposed to judge accurately, judge rightly, judge under the surface, get it exactly right. We're not just called to not judge, we're called to be the best judges. And nowhere is that more important than on matters that impact the rights of children.
And I think you mentioned in your article the first red flag, I think, was back in 2016, or when because their longtime photographer is gay. Talk about that.
Okay, so I didn't know this, but Megan Basham uncovered it. 2016 was the time where there was some kind of scandal where some left-leaning news source was like, "Why haven't they featured a same-sex couple in Fixer Upper? Oh, this is a scandal." And they pulled up some, doctrinal statements from the church they went to, and I was really impressed. They didn't, thrash about. They didn't apologize. They allowed themselves, sort of in First Peter fashion, to just be silent, to just be silent, to just take it. And I'm like, that's actually a pretty acceptable Christian response. So I was like, well, maybe they'll take that tact this time. I don't know. So I was like, okay, they did a good job back then. But then it came out that their longtime photographer had welcomed a male partner into his marriage. And it sounds like they had a biological child and 4 adopted children. And now they've got this bizarre throuple arrangement taking place in their home. And, this gay photographer who's, forgive me, but so much of the narrative around marriage and family has framed gay adults as victims if they do not get what they want. And that is the way that we have seen this massive overhaul of the social fabric, is by framing adults who don't get what they want, specifically gay adults, in the conversation about marriage and family as the victims. And what happens when you're the victim? If you're the victim, we need to protect you. I mean, that kind of is you were talking about it. That's sort of the after the ball
Mm.
theory of like, we need to frame ourselves as, even though we're a minority, we're the victim that needs protecting, so everybody else needs to give us their allyship. And so that's what he did. Like, he shares this painful backstory in different like Instagram posts about his struggling childhood and feeling trapped, and is he good? I'm not a good boy. And therefore I am going to welcome this gay partner into my relationship, and my wife's okay with it, my children are doing great, and I'm good, I really am good. And then you've got Joanna Gaines under there like commenting, yes, you are good, yes. And that's when you start to go, all right, very clearly there's some kind of relational infiltration that's taking place in your world that is shaping you and shaping your doctrine, shaping your choices, shaping your behavior. When the reality is, for every Christian, it just has to work in the other direction. Our theology, our convictions, our biblical authority and knowledge needs to shape our relationships and not the other way around.
Right. And we'll get into this later, but that is what is loving, and the what they're doing is not loving. But we'll get to that later. But I want to quote something from your article. You say, when those in our innermost circle openly defy God's righteous decrees and we offer no objection, we take the first step down a slippery moral slope. The bottom of that slope is often full apostasy. Talk about
Mm-hmm.
that, because I've seen that so many times.
Yeah. And honestly, this has less to do with me being an activist, which I completely am. Like, I'm
By the
an
way, just how did you get into? Why did you become an activist on this issue?
rage, just rage. I just got really, really angry.
Just
I
pure
got,
rage.
I got angry when President Obama evolved on the topic of gay marriage, and the entire media establishment started to normalize mother and father loss in the name of advancing this new political aim of gay marriage, which they needed to say kids love missing their mother or father so that people didn't feel as comfortable supporting gay marriage. But on the other side of things, there was this emotional manipulative tool that was deployed across the nation by mainstream media outlets calling people that support traditional marriage as homophobes and bigots, with anti-gay animus fueling their perspective. And I was personally triggered by that because my mother has been in a same-sex relationship with her partner since I was 10. And I
Oh,
love them.
I didn't know that.
And I love her. No, that's what I'm saying, Becket. We have so much to talk about. And so this idea that like I think that when my mom and her partner think about people who love them, I think I'm in the top two. Like, I have never had any major conflict with them outside of standing my ground, which, since both of them tend to be pretty non-aggressive, they're like, makes sense. Like, there just hasn't been a whole lot of conflict between us on that basis. So this idea that you hate gay people if you think that children need a mother and father, that also broke me. And I was like, all right, let's throw down. We need to throw down. And I'm going to talk about the harms of mother and father loss, and also why Christians can and must be the most loving, sacrificial, initiating of relationships with their gay family and friends, and not give 1 inch on God's definition for marriage and sex and family. Because if you do, children are always victimized. So that's kind of how it started, this sort of anonymous blog where I wanted to speak to the church about how you hold the preciousness and worth of your gay family and friends in one hand and the truth of God in the other hand, and you cannot pick. You don't get to put one or the other one down. You hold both with all your might. You do everything 100%. That leads to significant friction, but it's the only biblical pathway forward. And then I started to really dig in, not just to kids need moms and dads and they're hurt when they lose one, but all the social science around the complementarity of mothering and fathering, the importance of a biological connection in the parent-child relationship as it relates to identity formation in children, and ensuring that children genuinely are safe and loved. And then, because I have a gay parent, I also fell into a network of other kids with LGBT parents who believed in traditional marriage. And now our nonprofit, Them Before Us, is the place where you're going to find the most stories of kids who have an LGBT parent or same-sex parents who talk about how it was a detriment to them growing up. So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get back to how this kind of the slippery slope leads to apostasy, because I cannot tell you. I mean, on the number of people when I got saved in 2009 at my church, uh, everyone was so on board with, my with me, and
Mhm.
they were so supportive, so encouraging, so loving. And I would say, I don't know how many, but I would say a large number of people from my church who have now left the church or apostatized or whatever have caved on this issue, and it's because of someone in their family.
Yeah.
And this is often the case, and you talk about this in the article.
Yeah, so honestly, I am writing this much more as a woman who's been in ministry for close to 30 years, whose husband was the senior pastor of our church for 15, and just watching people fall. So I just have seen it over and over and over that you'll have these previously faithful people, like Bible mavens, like people that know scripture in and out. And then their child comes out, or their niece decides that they're non binary, or their neighbor, is a man who starts wearing dresses, or maybe their husband or their wife starts to disclose same sex attraction and the struggles that are in their marriage. And I have just seen that when people have somebody in their immediate orbit who identifies as LGBTQ, that very, very quickly leads to a downfall of their theology. And they grasp for justification because they love the Lord, and they grasp for justification for how they can have both. How can I love the Lord and affirm the decisions that my son or daughter, niece or nephew, husband, wife, or neighbor is going through? And unfortunately, there are theological wolves out there who will give them a pass, a distorted reading of biblical orthodoxy that
Like
allows them
Matthew Vines and
yeah,
others.
yeah, and others. And so they take that justification. But the problem with that is if you cannot believe God on the things that are right before you, that are self evident, that so clearly have a cause and effect, the things that are demonstrable, the things that are self evident, why would you believe him in the things that are more mysterious, like the resurrection and the
Hmm.
virgin birth and the second coming? If you're going to disbelieve God on the things that are so plain, like God made them male and female, and that the two need to become one flesh, and let no man separate them, um, how can you believe God on the things that are harder to verify? So that's what I've seen. I've just seen a terrible, sad, sometimes predictable slide where once you compromise on God's design for sex and marriage, you very likely are on the road to complete rejection of your faith altogether.
And let's talk about God's design for marriage and for sexuality, because I've talked about this before. But God designed sex between one man and one woman for life for a reason. It wasn't
Mhm.
arbitrary. As you said, it was for human flourishing, and we see that when that design is upheld, we see human flourishing. We see children raised in healthy ways, and they are mentally healthy and socially healthy, emotionally healthy. But and I talked about this on the Lila Rose show. Like one of one of the reasons why, I mean, there are many reasons, but why I think the Bible prescribes homosexual behavior in the Old Testament and the New Testament is is because it never leads to life. It leads to death. Like there's no procreative aspect of it. And I talked about this on Lila Rose, but Onan in Genesis was his Judah commanded him to, or told him to marry his brother's wife because his brother had just died, and he was really resentful of that, and he basically spilled his seed, quote unquote, so to speak, and instead of impregnating her. And what did God do to him? God killed him. God killed Onan
Yep.
because that led to death. And so
Right.
it's not. And when I got saved, I I totally understood this immediately. I understood the guardrails that God puts up for sexuality, because if you abide by His uh, divine ordinance and His wisdom, then there's so much. there's no heartbreak, there's no STDs, there's no, the Me Too movement. There's none of that exists. If
Right.
everyone, and I know we're all fallen human beings, but if everyone abided by God's design for marriage and sexuality, none of that would happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you else what wouldn't happen. Virtually no teens that are homeless, a drastically reduced rate of teen pregnancy, hardly any teens killing themselves or dropping out of high school or living in poverty, children living in poverty. Pretty much every social ill that we are facing today is overpopulated by the same demographic, and that is fatherless children.
Mm-hmm.
Largely children that were born to a single mother because people were rejecting God's mandate to only have sex within a committed, lifelong heterosexual union. Because you see, 90% of teens that are on the street did not have a dad. 63% of teens that commit suicide are fatherless. 70 to 85% of prison inmates didn't have a father. 71% of teen girls that get pregnant don't have a dad. I mean, like, there is not one social problem that you cannot trace back to rejecting God's design for sex and marriage. So everything you're saying is true as it relates to protecting adults from STDs or from sexual aggression or victimization, but it is exponentially more true when you look at the impact that it has on children. And, Protestants don't do a great job of understanding the procreative aspect, or I would say even mandate, that goes along with marriage. But God's explicit about it. When you look in Malachi in chapter 2, where he is rebuking the religious leaders for degrading their marital commitments, pretty much by rejecting their older wives and marrying young trophy wives, he talks about why he makes the two one. In flesh and spirit they are his. He asks rhetorically, what was the one God seeking? And then he answers his own question. He's seeking godly offspring, not just offspring. He's seeking godly offspring. He doesn't just want kids for any reason, any means, in any way. He wants godly offspring. I think that we could say that in today's terms, that children whose rights and well-being are protected, whose development and their flourishing is prioritized. That's what godly offspring looks like. And if you do things God's way, you're going to exempt children from so many of the physical, mental, emotional, academic, and relational harms, identity formation harms that so many young people today are struggling with. If you reject God's standard for marriage, children are harmed. And I would say they are the primary victims.
Well, I see kind of the result of that. One of the results is when you see kind of all these protests on college campuses, like Queers for Palestine and
Mhm.
Globalize the what is it? Intifada?
Intifada.
Intifada. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Okay. Um,
I'm
but
glad you don't know that. That's actually very comforting to me that you haven't said globalize the intifada so much that it just rolls off your tongue.
That's the first time I've ever said it. But I kind of see those kids as a result of either like broken marriages or fatherless, homes. It just seems to be that's the case.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that we have had these transcendent pathways to understand our sense of identity and our sense of belonging that have been passed down and guarded really by the five major religions of the world. Like, every religion has some kind of expectation that a man will marry a woman prior to having sex with her and then stay together with her for life, because they've all seen the social chaos and the social fallout when children are not connected to their fathers. I mean, it's a non-negotiable that children are going to be connected to their mothers through pregnancy and usually post-pregnancy. But whether or not a child is connected to their father has to do with social expectations around how he treats the child's mother and whether or not he's committed to the child's mother. And so we have all of these historical pathways for kids to have an identity formation, have a sense of belonging, stability, family. But in the world of sort of our modern family remake, where mothers or fathers are optional, where you can cut a child's biological parent or two out of their life at the moment of conception through reproductive technologies, where you can swap and trade them through the process of surrogacy, where now we are overhauling our parenthood laws to say that mothers and fathers are completely optional. Where do you think children are going to turn for a sense of identity? Where are they going to turn for a sense of family and belonging? Well, the progressive left is very happy to tell them who they are. And it will
Mhm.
be a racial identity or a sexual identity. They're very happy to say, oh, your parents don't love you. We will be your family. This gay activist or this LGBTQ friendly home downtown, we will help you emancipate yourself from your intolerant parents. We will be your family. And you see all of those college kids, there was that situation in 2016 where they were screaming at the professors over
Oh
their
gosh.
chastisement of the Halloween costumes. And they're saying, I need this to be a safe space. This is supposed to be my family. Well, obviously, you're going to feel that way if you never had the kind of love and security in your own nuclear home. So we are destabilizing children today in the ways that they have never had to seek and form a sense of community, identity, stability that children have had to deal with in the past, because we are degrading the place where they used to find that kind of kinship, network, familial stability, and identity formation.
Yeah, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as a safe space. It was all dangerous. I mean, and we all because of the non-safe spaces, we my generation was very resilient. We're very resilient. We're not fragile
Yeah.
people that like freak out at the smallest trigger. Um
Mm-mm.
and the other
Gen
thing
X,
is
Gen X is going to save the nation. Let's just say it
Gen
right
X. I
away.
know
Gen
Gen
X.
X.
Yeah.
Thank God for Gen X.
Yeah.
But when I was in high school in the '80s, or actually in elementary school, I remember I always say taboos are good for society. They keep society together. We need taboos. We've broken almost all taboos. But when I was a teenager or even younger, one of my biggest fears in life was that my parents would get divorced
Yeah.
because it was so stigmatized in my high school or
Mm.
elementary school. If you're a parent, I didn't know anyone, and I went to, private schools. I didn't know anyone in my class, I don't think in elementary school or high school, whose parents were divorced. Everyone had a very solid family. So, but I always say, like, we need to bring that taboo back, that stigma
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. There has to be, especially as it relates to marriage, there needs to be legal rewards, economic rewards, and social rewards for getting and staying married.
Yeah.
And, there really is, it's not a private relationship. It is a private relationship, but it has a very critical public purpose. And that actually is the reason why we have why we exalt marriage to begin with, why we get some kind of economic breaks, or we should get economic breaks or economic benefits, because this relationship does something that other relationships, that your close friendship or your tennis partner or your soccer team or your business partner, this relationship does something for society that
Hmm.
no other adult connection can do. And that is the creating of children and the ideal place to raise those children. And now, I mean, don't get me started, but now that we've got gay marriage on the scene, we've actually inverted the reason that we support marriage. Now it is categorically never a procreative relationship. And the situation, the scenario, the setting for child rearing is always going to deprive children of several things that they need. It's going to deprive them of a biological relationship, which is going to make it harder for them to answer the question, who am I? It's hard for kids to answer the question, who am I, if they can't answer the question, whose am I? It's going to introduce an unrelated adult to the child's home, which statistically, in 100% of statistical scenarios, always increases risks of abuse and neglect. It is going to deprive children of the necessary mothering or fathering that maximizes their development. And very, very often, those children will hunger for the male love that they are missing or the female love that they are missing, and they will seek it out in ways that can often be unhealthy or dangerous. Because if you're not well loved by your father, very often girls and boys will find a way to meet that need for male love, but it won't be often. Um,
Well,
in
talk
the
about
lives.
that a little bit more about the most. You say the most in this article. You say the most dangerous place for a child today is in the home of an unrelated man.
Yeah, left to care for the child themselves. That's not me. That's a quote from probably one of the most well-respected and most cited sociologists in the country, Brad Wilcox. And he has looked at cohabiting data. And this has actually been really long recognized. that an unrelated adult in the home will always decrease investment, connection, and protection, even stepmothers. I mean, the reason why we've got so many fairy tales about stepmothers is because they don't tend to be a value add for the child. There is discrimination in the home. She does tend to treat her own children well, invest more money. I mean, we have two Princeton sociologists that studied this in stepmothers specifically. They spend less money on food on their stepchildren. They buckle the stepchildren's seatbelts less often. They take them to the doctor less frequently. On average, stepchildren of stepmothers go to college 0 years, where their own biological child will go to college on average for at least 1 year. I mean, there's a very measurable difference. But the most drastic differences are when an unrelated man joins the home, whether it is a cohabiting live-in boyfriend or a stepfather. And here, the research is so extensive and irrefutable that sociologists actually have a name for the risk posed by unrelated adults in the child's home, and it's called the Cinderella Effect.
Oh,
That
wow.
that child is much more likely to be mistreated, and obviously the mistreatment at the hands of a stepmother is going to look different, but the mistreatment at the hands of a stepfather is very often fatal. And I often, when I'm speaking to different groups live, I will say, look, if it's true that biology doesn't matter in the parent-child relationship, if any two will do, if all children need is to be loved, or if all that matters is that the adults are happy, if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy, then children living with their mother and her cohabiting boyfriend will be doing great, because the mother and her partner are happy, because there's two adults. Maybe there's more economic advantages. The child has a mother and a father figure. So those kids should be doing great. And then I tell everybody, now everybody get your phone out and Google the words mother's boyfriend and tell me what you see. Then I just let people shout out their answers. And it's things like, mother's boyfriend suffocates toddler in plastic bag. Mother's boyfriend tortures child in cage. Mother's boyfriend accused of homicide of teen girl. Mother's boyfriend trapped child in basement and sexually assaulted them. Or why are mother's boyfriend so likely to kill? Or mother's boyfriend and child violence. Why the overrepresentation? I mean, it goes on for tens of thousands of pages. So this introduction of an unrelated adult in the child's home, whether it's a same-sex parent or an opposite-sex parent, that's not, I mean, it's so significant. It's one of the most significant ways that we can put children at risk is by normalizing homes where an unrelated adult is sharing living spaces with them. And that's honestly exactly what Chip and Joanna Gaines did.
Wow. I didn't know those statistics. That's insane. Okay, I want to quote something else from your article. You say, and you're talking about, you say, yes, biblically loving our LGBT neighbors will inevitably result in relational friction. By the way, Jesus said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword and divide families. But and you go on to say, but when friction arises, scripture repeatedly warns us to be the influencers, not the influenced. Talk about that for a second.
This is very, very hard, especially for people like me who actually tilt much closer to the grace giving side of the Christian spectrum than the truth telling side of the. I mean, everyone thinks, oh, you're a truth teller, Katie. You can throw all of the truth bombs. Well, I do, because children are being victimized and it enrages me. But I mean, left to myself, I don't want conflict. And I've had those situations, there was a conversation I had with my mom. Actually, I had it with so many different members of our extended family who would come to visit us, and everybody, gay and straight, were all like shacking up. And, they had cohabiting relationships. And every time they would come to visit us, we would say, we would love to host you. We will be preparing beds in 2 different rooms for you guys because nobody who isn't married is going to sleep together in our house. I mean, we did it for everybody. And I got really emotional whenever I would say that, whether it was to my father and the girlfriend that he happened to have at that time, or my mother and her partner. And I mean, I would tremble and I would cry. But you cannot bend on those kinds of things. Like, you have got to stand strong on those issues. Even though, for especially, people like me and people like a lot of the people, like, that's terrifying. I would say it with fear and trembling, like crying, like, I'm so sorry, but this is just how it is. Like, we are setting the standard for our kids, and we're going to say it to them if they choose to come home with their boyfriend or girlfriend on Christmas break. And I have to say it to you, but I love you so much. I love you so much, but I just cannot have you. I mean, like, look, it's hard. It's hard to incorporate biblical truth in your relationships. And it is going to create friction and it's going to be uncomfortable. But the only ways for it not to be uncomfortable is either to cut your gay family out of your life. And as far as I'm concerned, that is not a biblical option. They might leave you, but you do not leave them. And the
Hmm.
other option for a friction-free relationship is to compromise on your belief and never talk about your conviction or your faith. So those are the two very neat and clean and clearly unbiblical options. So the only option that you have is the messy middle, where you hold fast to your convictions and you have difficult conversations. And sometimes you might cry in a driveway. That's
Yeah,
how that
that
goes.
happened to me. That happened to me. One year I brought a boyfriend home for Christmas. There was a there was an emergency meeting in my family. My siblings were very upset about it, which they had a right to be. But my parents insisted that I come anyway. But when I got there, my mother, she took me aside and she said, Beck, can you and so sleep in separate bedrooms? And I was like, yes, mom. But we ended up not. But we ended up kind of like sneaking into each other's room. But I mean, I think that is absolutely right, and I think it's the right of the parent to make those ground rules in house.
And it's kind of like, I go stay at my mom's house or my dad's house when he had, a girlfriend living with him. I don't go to their house and say, live by my rules.
Right.
But we did say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in our house as it is in heaven. As much as possible, that's what we tried to do. And part of that was worldview formation with our children, where we wanted to create a distinction between what does life look like in Christ in a way that's tangible and observable, not just abstract, not just on the pages of scripture, but what does it look like to live it out? And part of it was we needed to fear God more than we feared the loss of relationship. And that is a hard place to be, especially when there's so many Christian voices that will say, maintaining the relationship is the most important thing. Maintain it at all costs. And I mean, I'll just quote a little Luther here, like unity when possible. Unity is really, really important to God, but truth at all costs. If you
Hmm.
want to put unity at the top, you will lose truth. And that's not the biblical path. You put truth at the top. You do unity whenever possible, but sometimes unity is not possible. If you lose it for the sake of standing firmly in the truth, that's a biblical reason to lose a relationship, in my opinion.
And I mentioned this before we started recording, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which I talk about in my first book, they they wouldn't compromise and bow down to the golden statue. They were willing to go into a fiery furnace and be burned to death rather than compromise God's word by one iota. And
Yeah.
as believers, we have to have the same mindset and the same attitude as those guys. And the thing is when we compromise and we kind of become gay affirming because our child comes out, that, as Laura Perry Smalt says, when she was she was trans and then got saved, she said that she came home to her parents because they never lied to her. So
Mhm.
it's so important to, as you said, stand firm in your convictions, but then love that person, love your child, but never compromise on that position, because that's actually unloving to your
Yeah.
child. It's sending your child down a path of destruction, possibly eternal destruction, and it's the most unloving thing you can do.
Yeah. It's scary in the moment, especially for people pleasers like me.
Hmm.
But it's so interesting. I've been doing this now. I became a Christian, when I was almost 18. And it took me a while to love God with all my mind. Like he got my heart right away. I was still absolute mess, a mess. I was such a mess. But, I went to college, I met my husband, we started to grow together. God slowly got me on board with his design for sex and marriage over the course of like a 4-year time period. Um, but I still didn't end up talking about it a whole lot until I started publicly. Well, until we had kids, really, and then I kind of got into the public space. So I had to have more and more of these uncomfortable conversations. And it's interesting to me because there was weeping and gnashing of teeth among family and friends when I came out with an unbending position. And it was
Mm.
very, very hard. I mean, I like I said, I would cry about it or I'd worry about it, but I couldn't see a way out of it without sinning. Like I would scheme. How can I do this without having a difficult conversation? And I just couldn't figure it out. But I'll tell you something, after 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, after a little while, very often they come back to you,
Yeah.
especially if you continue to be faithful in the sense of loving and sacrificing, meeting their needs, being a place where they can stay when they're having oral surgery or, in whatever way that you can tangibly meet their needs. I have seen remarkable conciliation, even if it's not complete agreement, but I can kind of see where you're coming from, or you know what? I actually think you're right about that. But it's so hard in the moment not to bend. There's a lot of bluster and it's very hard to stand up straight. You don't need to step forward in aggression, but you should not step back in retreat. You just need to stand firm.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before, but my family members, my 7 siblings and my parents, I mean, it was, kind of a different generation, but they never, and they're all believers. It's crazy. God's had so much grace on my family. My parents are in heaven. I'm so jealous of that. Um, but my siblings and my parents never once bended on the or caved to this issue. They never once said, "Oh, Beckett, it's okay. Like it's not a sin, really. You're okay." They always stood their ground, and and I really respected them for that. Even when I was living that quote unquote lifestyle, I really respected my family for sticking to their convictions. And of course, when I got saved, the first people I called and emailed immediately were all my family members. I was just like and I was suddenly I felt so much love for my siblings and my parents, and I was like, thank God you guys stood your ground and never compromised, and you always loved me through it all, and you prayed for me for 20 years, but they never caved to culture, never.
I've heard you talk about your family, and your mother specifically, and I'm like, dang, mom goals, mom goals.
Mom goals.
Because it's hard, like, I
Yes.
started, it must have been, like, close to 20 years ago, maybe when so I got on Facebook in 2009, so it must have been right after that. I started a Facebook group for moms who had LGBTQ children,
Mm.
and they were trying to resist the Christian voices saying, "You don't actually love your child unless you validate, affirm, and encourage them in their identity and their relationships." And these moms, they felt so alone because they're like, I cannot forsake my Lord by lying about his word, but I will not forsake my child by cutting them off. And so I created
Mhm.
this little Facebook group. I was probably just 12 moms or something of mothers that wouldn't bend. And then they all talk to each other. So, Annie's coming home for Christmas and she wants to bring her partner. Pray for me because I really want to be a sweet witness to both of them, but I have to stand firm on, where we're at in terms of whether or not you share rooms. Or, you know, Angela is about to transition and take her first, dose of testosterone. And she asked me to go to the clinic with her. And I'm just not sure what a biblical mother would do in this situation. Please pray for me. And it was very, very messy to stay faithful to God's word and to have, as much as your convictions would allow, full engagement with your child. And I've heard your mother, the stories of her, and she seemed to have
Mhm.
just walked that line so beautifully.
I know she was she, she was amazing. I'm actually writing a book about her right now. That will, yeah, I it's all about my mother's prayer. And so I think the title of the book is going to be A Mother's Prayer for Her Gay Son, but it
Yeah.
is really going to address all like just what we're talking about now, all of these issues, and what, you know, it's kind of like a guide for parents and what to do, what not to do, how
Good.
to answer, you know, answer lots of different questions for parents.
Yeah.
And so we've heard the bad news. Now, do you think that there's a shift going on now? Is it coming back around, or what do you think's happening in culture right now in terms of LGBT issues?
There's a vibe shift, especially on the right. And a lot of it is good and some of it is not good. Um, and what I mean by that is the tea poisoned LGB. I think a
Right.
lot of the different extending of tolerance and grace that we had to the more sort of sympathetic picture of our gay and lesbian family and friends who were not necessarily aggressive, but genuinely were seeking to meet a legitimate need of inclusion and connection and friendship and love. They were just meeting that need in an illegitimate way so much. And that's what I see so much of what's happening in the world of my gay and lesbian friends is they really were starved of something that they were made for in their childhood, whether it was protection from predators or a loving relationship with the same-sex parent, or well, you know, just a variety of different things I've seen, or exposure to porn when they were really
Hmm.
young, and then the twisting of appetites that go along with that.
Hmm.
And I think that there was a little more sympathy and understanding for the plight of gays and lesbians, and then the T came in and said, we just want to pee. So let this 60-year-old man in a closed space with no windows or, um, access with your 9-year-old daughter, or I have a right to play on your volleyball team, even though I'm a giant man and I'm going to give women concussions because I'm going to spike the ball so hard on their face that they're not going to be able to see straight afterwards. I mean, like the T overplayed the hand so much that we see a backlash poisoning sort of the LGB, and even gay voices on the left are saying, yeah, I went to this pride event and there wasn't any L, G, or B anywhere. It was T, T, T everywhere. And then it was like BIPOC people, and it was free Palestine. And it's like, I just think that they've like completely gone off the rails to the point where everybody is sick of it. The other thing is that emotional manipulation that we talked about that really was very effective. I mean, it kept me on the sidelines for a long time. I did not want people to think that I hated gay people. How could I get in this space and continually be accused of hating my own mother, who's like one of the most important people to me on the planet? Just that people would think that about me kept me on the sidelines for so long because I could not handle the perception of being anti-gay. I,
Hmm.
I I couldn't handle it. But at some point, everybody goes, you know what? Screw that. Screw that. You've called me all the names. It's no longer going to keep me silent. And so we are seeing a measurable shift. For example, support among Republicans for same-sex marriage is down 16% in the last 2 or 3 years because the spell has broken in some ways. The censorship regime that both through emotionally manipulative messages, but also genuine censorship on social media platforms that kept people from speaking up and saying what they really believe is largely gone. And now you see a resurgence of people. You know, when I used to post in 2018 a picture of a baby on a hairy man's chest that had just been acquired through surrogacy and his partner standing there taking a photo where of course the men are bare chested and like rippling, and it's so much more about them getting a picture than a picture of the newborn. Like I would say children deserve their mother, this is an injustice. And for the most part people would say all I see is two loving parents. Well, that is not how it works anymore. Now I post a picture of two men with a surrogate born baby, and the quote tweets are things like, my politics is whatever makes this illegal. I mean, I just think that I think that people have been freed from, you know, the cone of shame that forced them
Hmm.
to keep their opinions on the sideline. And so, all that to say, I think that for the most part, it is good. And common sense is making a comeback, and people are feeling more free to say what they believe. I do think that it is swinging. I think we're in danger also of swinging to the place where we are degrading people that identify as gay and lesbian.
Hmm.
Like the homophobe joke and the you're gay and all of that, that I never would have said is like on trend, like right now. And I want people who experience same sex attraction to feel like they can come to church and to feel
Yeah.
like they're welcome in conservative spaces. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here and still a little bit of caution.
Yeah, and I always say, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And you know, I was that guy. I was the guy who was going
Mhm.
to gay pride parades and blah blah blah, and voting for gay marriage. And God saved me out of that. He plucked me out of that, and pulled me into His marvelous light. And so no one is too far gone. No one. And so we obviously, and I always try to preface these conversations with, we have nothing but love for you. Nothing but love. That's what motivates me. That
Mhm.
all I care about. I did an whole episode on this. All I care about is people knowing, having a relationship with Christ and having eternal life. That's
Yeah.
all I care about.
Mhm.
And that's why I talk about these issues. And I'm sure that's the same for you.
Well, I care about that, but I also care about justice for children.
Yes.
And I totally want to save people's souls, but I also want to redeem the culture, because if we don't, children are victimized. And that's just a no go zone for Christians. Like everywhere that Christianity has gone in every century, in every country, Christians have offended adults and protected children. It's just true Christianity. One manifestation of our pure and undefiled religion before God is to extend child protection to whatever ways the culture is seeking to victimize them. So, absolutely, I want to be fishers of men and I want to save people's souls. But also, we have a mandate. The church is God's plan A for child protection, and we have not understood that
Mhm.
calling to the degree that we need to.
Well, we're going to leave it there. That's amazing. You're such an incredible voice in this area. So tell us where people can find you and find them before us. And we'll put the links down below as well.
Yeah, thenbeforeus.com is the place to subscribe. Find our Substack. We would love for you to be a part of kind of the regular um, newsletters and updates that we're sending. I did something a couple weeks ago on, you're very familiar. Is being gay genetics or is it a choice? And I was like, and the answer is no. Like, no, that's typically not the way to think about it. And I just wrote something about why Catholics and Protestants cannot be at each other's throats right now, even though I am like a Bible thumping Baptist pastor's wife. It's really, really important for us to form a coalition to fight against these
Hmm.
nefarious forces. So, like, come and let us train you to defend children. We are trying to do in the marriage and family space what a couple hundred organizations are trying to do in the pro-life space, defend the fundamental rights of children. And we just need all hands on deck because the threats to kids are grave. And there's very few people that understand it and are speaking up on their behalf.
Well, thank you, Katy Faust, for what you do and for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me chat with you and your audience.